So, those are my experiences, nothing compared to my uncle's story. Where do I begin? So, my uncle and I are very close. He's basically like a second dad to me. So I trust him. And I remember one time, he went camping with us, my siblings, and myself and him. We all went up to the woods, and I was feeling kind of scared, because it was dark and I was a little kid, probably about 8. And he said, you know, I understand that feeling of just being afraid sometimes. One day I'll tell you the story of Catalina. I was like, okay, whatever that means. And so one day out of the blue, somehow reminded of that camping trip, and I brought up to him, oh, you said you were going to tell me that story. And so it took him a while because he really didn't want to tell me, but he thought it was important. So one day he told me, and I really don't like telling it because I have like a visceral reaction to it. So, not to be too melodramatic, but if my eyes water, it's not because I'm getting emotional, it's just this very instinctual reaction that I have to things that terrify me. So, forgive me. So, okay, where do I start? My uncle ran away from home when he was 16 years old, and he ended up becoming kind of like a traveler. He traveled around, hopped trains, found odd-end jobs, slept in barns, didn't really have a place to go, just kind of wandering. So one day, he was in Fremont, California, and his companion at that time was his small dog. And he came across this orchard, and he went through the orchard and he found this house there. Now the house was completely dilapidated, looked like it had been abandoned for many years, completely isolated, so no other houses around, and he had nowhere else to go. He had very little money and resources, so he decided he would kick it there. Big mistake. So, he was there a few nights, and there was nothing weird. There was a bed in the corner of the room, I think a chest, and that was it. The rest of the room was bare. They had a closet, kitchen, bathroom, very small house. So, one night, he's laying in bed, and his dog starts going crazy. Excuse me. His dog starts going crazy, and some of you who are interested in the paranormal might know that when an animal, and as I said, with Harry's story, whatnot, animals are usually a little bit more perceptive to entities, if you will, spirits, the paranormal, different energies. So his dog just starts going insane, and he thought, alright, maybe he hears a rat, or he senses some kind of animal outside, maybe another dog, someone approaching. That wasn't the case. So he thought that was a bit odd. And so over the next few nights, this dog would wake up and go crazy. And there was no way to calm him down, and he would end up like whining and cowering in the corner of the room. So I'm already getting chills. I don't like telling this story. So maybe about 2 weeks being there, my uncle wakes up to this screaming. It's a male voice, and it's just screaming bloody murder. He didn't distinctly say what this voice was saying because it was basically hurling obscenities, very colorful language. Just really angry. And it would wake him up every night, this yelling. And then one night, he hears the yelling again, wakes him up, and he gets this feeling that he's being watched. And not only that, he knows that whatever it is not good. It's a very evil, malevolent energy that he's getting. So, he started waking up to that not only the screams, but also that feeling of being watched. Like he was being observed, and there was nothing he could do about it. Now, why he didn't get out of this house, I've asked. He said he basically had nowhere to go. He was in an orchard, so... Oh, by the way, this was in June of, 1975. Yeah, because he was 16. So, June 1975, the orchards were in bloom, food source, and free housing. So, one night he wakes up to this dark mass floating across the floor. Came up, hovered above him, and he had no explanation for what it was. But he said that it completely drained his energy, and he felt this overwhelming sense of dread and depression and terror. And then, the dog's going crazy, cowering in the corner of the room. His bed starts shaking, and he thought, okay, earthquake, now, great, this is excellent timing for that, earthquake, but nothing else in the room is moving. The chest that I mentioned is not moving. So his bed starts shaking violently, and this thing is right above him. And then he looks down, and the bed is a foot off the floor. And then he said after that, he just fainted out of terror. So, if I were him, I would have gotten the F out of there. I wouldn't have stayed. He said, at this age, boys, generalization, but boys tend to want to prove their manhood, right? They want to be brave, they want to be courageous in the face of danger or evil, what have you. So he said that's why he stayed. Because he wouldn't let this thing, whatever it was, take him down. The next night, he suddenly wakes up. He has no explanation for why he just woke up, but he did. And he looks out the window, and this is actually the part that freaks me out the most. He looks out the window, and again, the windows are bare because, poor doesn't have money to furnish it, not even his house. So, it's just the window, and the door is right next to the window. Just to give you a layout. Looks through the window, and there's this face staring at him. He said it was of a man, and it's just standing there staring at him with this look on its face of pure rage. And it had, whatever it was, had blood on his face. So my uncle thought, alright, this guy seems to be a little bit shaken up, maybe a little bit traumatized, might have been attacked. Goes to the door, opens the door, turns the corner, and there's nothing there. So he thought, alright, must have seen me get up and walk to the door and decided to book it. So he comes back in and he sits back down on his bed. He looks out the window, and no expression has changed. It's still standing there looking at him with this look of just pure hatred. So he gets up again, and he goes out the door, turns the corner, and there's nothing there. So after that, he just ran back to his bed, put the covers over his head, and went to sleep. Little tidbit I should mention is in the closet, my uncle said that there was this perpetual pool of blood. Never dried out, was always there. So he thought that was really odd and really creepy. And all of a sudden, he's still in the house. I don't know why he would stay there. He's still in the house, and he starts smelling this smell. And he said the only way to describe it is the smell of death, of decomposing flesh. Just the most evil smell he's ever smelled. And it just permeated the entire house. So he blamed it on, maybe a plumbing situation. Or, he was in an orchard, maybe a dead animal close by, and the wind was carrying the smell. And, he wanted to rationalize it. But it would always disappear during the day, and at night, in the early morning, it would always come back. And along with the smell, he would always feel that presence, whatever it was. So he decided it was time to have other people come over to the house because he did not feel safe. So he had his two friends 2 childhood friends and his brother, my Uncle Chris, who is a vagabond. You know, he travels all over the country, and which is important for how I'm going to explain strange corroborations later on. So, there's 4 teenagers in the house now, and one of the friends, Jay, I'm not going to give his last name. So, they're all in the house, and my uncle, my first uncle, says to his brother, why don't you go in that closet and check it out, because there's this pool of blood in there that I really want you to see. I want you to check it out. And so when my Uncle Chris goes into the closet, this part scares me too. When he goes into the closet, he's looking down at the pool of blood, but he knows that something else is in there with him. So the closet actually has a pull-down. Okay, sorry about that. My camera shut off. As if to say, hurry up. So where was I? My Uncle Chris is in the closet, looking at the pool of blood, looks up, sees the same man face entity that my first uncle saw, and felt really terrified. And so this face, again, the look of anger, it looks at him, and all of a sudden it swoops down and goes, bah! Like that, right in his face. And so my Uncle Chris booked it out of there so fast, and this thing, whatever it was, lifted him in the air and threw him through a window. So there's glass in his face was bleeding. The 3 other guys are running out of the house through the orchard. Now Jay was the slowest one, so he got lifted up and thrown against this apple tree, so with such force that one of the branches snaps off and he breaks all of his ribs on his right side. I didn't really get any other details about that night. I know that his parents arrived and took him home, took him to the hospital. I want to wrap it up because I know it's getting long. So the next day, my uncle decides that there's something evil in this house, and this house can no longer exist. So he ends up burning it to the ground. And he says that as soon as the whole house was engulfed in flames, he saw this ball of energy shoot out of the top. And so the police came, and the paper at this time in the 70s in Fremont, California, was the Argus. And so I actually went online and checked the archives, and this article does exist about a house being burned down. So I just kind of want to condense a little bit because there are some other details, but again, I don't want to take up too much of your time. So let's see, 20 years go by, and before I knew about this story, my brother knew about it. He knew about this first. So my aunt died last year, and at the funeral, my Uncle Chris showed up. He starts asking my uncle these questions, reminding him about the experience, and my brother says that my uncle looks at him, and he takes a moment, and then he's like, that's right, there was something just evil in that house. And they talk about the story a little more. So it just seems unlikely that my uncle would bring up this story when I'm 8 years old and not tell me about it until I'm 19. And then my uncle corroborates everything that happened 20 years ago. And it just seems so elaborate. If this were light, it just seems like such an elaborate, over-the-top, unnecessary scheme to scare his niece. And I really don't think that's the case. So, yep, that's the story. I'll try and come up with a cheerier topic next time. With that, I think I'll end this. So you can follow me on Instagram at Avrunks, and if you want to get a hold of me, do not email me. Do not, because I do not check my email. I know I should, but I don't. The best way to reach me would be through a message on YouTube. Okay, so thank you for your time, and I will see you all soon.